Good Count Corla. Minister, I welcome the opportunity to speak on this matter today. As we are all well aware, the financial and economic constraints facing the state and the people are monumental. The COVID-19 crisis has resulted in a severe economic change for Ireland. We know from the PBO analysis that the Department of Finance, in its own economic forecast underpinning Budget 2021, estimates that GDP will fall by 2.5% in 2020 before increasing by 1.4% in 2021. The Department also estimates that the unemployment rate will be 10.7% in 2021, followed by an increase unless further severe public health restrictions need to be imposed. With all of that being said, Count Corla, I do want to acknowledge at the outset that both Ministers Donoghue and McGrath appear to have genuinely and sincerely attempted to arrive at a financial set of measures that will have the maximum benefit across a range of sectors. But I have to say I am concerned about broadband and indeed the lack of ambition concerning the rollout of broadband in rural communities. Given that the Midlands has been very adversely impacted upon by what I call the unjust transition, I would have imagined that the rollout of broadband would be prioritised in terms of trying to bring investment into regions, particularly the Midlands, and that indeed the Midlands would be prioritised to attract investors, because we are very much disadvantaged by the lack of proper broadband. I had a Zoom meeting only last week with IBEC, and Midlands companies were saying that they had problems with phones, and they had problems with computers glitching also, where workers were trying to work from home. So it is a major, major obstacle that must be overcome if we are to be serious about investment in the Midlands. I do want to welcome the much anticipated commitments around the education sector. Education is the engine of progress, both socially and economically, and we need to ensure that there is continued investment in that sector across all age groups and categories. I note that the Department of Education and Skills currently spends approximately £1.9 billion, or almost 20% of its total educational budget annually, on making additional provision for children with special needs. We absolutely need to ensure that this budget is securely ring-fenced. I'm also aware that the Minister for Special Education and Inclusion recently announced a series of priorities, including measures aimed at improving initial teacher training in order to ensure that teachers and SNAs are supported to receive training and ongoing guidance in the area of special educational needs provision. What I want to see emerge in very practical terms from this budget is a commitment to provide a wraparound support service in schools for young people, including occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, behavioural practitioners and crisis supports in schools. In Laois Offaly alone, there are currently 1,118 children waiting in excess of 12 months for occupational therapy, while we still have 159 children waiting in excess of 12 months for speech therapy. It is also vital that sufficient budgetary provision is made to improve long-term planning for the provision of special school and special class places, that no child misses out, and indeed that every effort is made by school leaders and boards of management to include children who may not come from a particular catchment but desperately need a place in schools. Also, in terms of Agricultural Minister, you will be aware that farming organisations have called for a full compensation for any further losses during the transition period arising from Brexit uncertainty, sterling volatility and COVID-19 impact across all sectors. I and my rural colleagues will be taking the time over the next few days to digest the exact details of the budgetary supports provided to the agriculture sector, but I'm aware from reporting that today's budget approach to the Department's various schemes and taxation measures remain essentially unchanged from last year's budget. Although I had hoped, at a minimum, to see a further strengthening of the Government's Brexit contingency fund, which allocated £110 million to agriculture, I do understand the need to refocus this allocation to strengthen existing supports. Minister, young farmers need urgent supports if we are to encourage young people to take up farming, and I fully support Macra na Feirme's submission to this budget, and I support their call for a dedicated debt mediation service to be set up for farmers and for tax exemptions on the leasing of farmland to family members under 30. The Government need to listen more to the voice of young farmers in this country, who are indeed very well represented by Macra na Feirme. What is also desperately needed, Minister, is a commitment to finally bring forward the reforms around the Fair Deal Nursing Home Support Scheme, Amendment Bill 2019. We have to make financial provision for these reforms which must include measures around farmland leased to third parties, in line with other government policy on inheritance under agricultural relief. There are just a few other issues I want to highlight at this point, Minister, with respect to agriculture. I do welcome the Department prioritising the retention of schemes until a new cap is in place. From what I understand, however, no income volatility scheme is expected to be put in place, and I certainly think we need to re-examine that one. I also welcome the new measures aimed at increasing funding for new market developments. This is going to be absolutely vital in the months and years that lie ahead. I do want to ask for more detail on the introduction of the new REP scheme, Minister. As I understand it, there is only a pilot project being set in place. We will also be looking closely at the proposal within REP scheme to link a reduction in the national suckler herd to access to the scheme. I find that would be absolutely outrageous. We had it with the BEAM scheme last year, where farmers couldn't take the scheme up because they weren't willing to reduce their herd by 5%, and rightly so. And I feel that we just have to stop scapegoating and blaming farmers for climate change. I believe we have to be fair. It's a sector that we depend upon in rural Ireland. Indeed, it's the backbone of the rural economy. Minister, it is also vital that more support be provided to the farm forestry and the forestry sector generally. This is an area of significant employment in rural counties, and its adequate support, such as the requested $4 million to restore the farmer premium and the introduction of a harvesting plan grant to assist forest owners. I will just conclude by asking that whatever happens with respect to COVID, that you remain open and engaged with the many various concerns and indeed the various sectors that make up Irish life and the Irish economy.
Thank you very much, Deputy.